Data had a brother, and if you remember lore at all, you probably remember him as everything Data wasn't. Cruel, manipulative, arrogant, dangerous. Data spent his life trying to understand humanity. Lore seemed to despise it. Data became one of Starfleet's finest officers. Lore became a murderer. So the story seems pretty simple. One brother was good, the other was evil. Except there's something Lore believed from almost the moment we met him. Something everyone dismissed because of who he later became. Lore believed humans were afraid of artificial life that was too powerful, too emotional, too difficult to control, and he believed Data was accepted precisely because Data was everything Lore wasn't. Quiet, polite, useful, safe. For years, I thought that was just Lore making excuses for himself. I'm not sure anymore. Because the more you look at what actually happened to Data, across the whole series, not just the happy parts, the more uncomfortable Lore's argument becomes. Lore was wrong about almost everything that mattered. But what if the worst thing about Lore is that he may have been right about the one thing nobody wanted to hear? Grab a seat in 10 Forward. We need to talk about Data's brother. Before Lore was a villain, he was a son. Before Lore was the villain, he was one of Soong's creations, and according to the story Data and Lore eventually uncover, Lore was activated before Data. He was designed with emotional expression and human-like mannerisms that made him, in some ways, appear more naturally human than his brother. Lore knew he was different and he knew it mattered. In his account of it, the colonists grew uneasy around him. His emotional range, the very thing that was supposed to make him more relatable, apparently made him harder to predict and harder for people to feel comfortable around. And then Lore is deactivated. After him comes Data. I want you to actually sit with what that means before we move on. Imagine being created by someone who calls himself your father. You don't turn out the way everyone hoped. You're too much, too emotional, too unpredictable. So you're switched off. And when you finally wake up again, years later, there's another son, a calmer son. A son who would eventually prove far easier for humans to trust. A son who becomes everything you never were allowed to be. That's how Lore seems to experience it, at least. I'm not asking you to accept it as objective fact, just to hold it as his truth for a minute. What if Lore didn't look at Data and see a brother? What if he looked at Data and saw his replacement? The brother who was easier to love. Look at the contrast the show actually gives you. Data is restrained, curious, respectful, endlessly willing to adapt himself to the people around him. Lore is emotional, resentful, openly contemptuous of the very humans he's surrounded by. And humans respond accordingly. Of course they do. But ask the harder question, was Lore completely wrong to notice the difference? Data enters human society by constantly adjusting himself to fit it. He studies etiquette, practices humor, works at friendship like it's homework, spends enormous visible effort trying to understand the people around him. Lore, from the moment we meet him, expects to simply be accepted as he already is. That's the real fault line between them. Data spent his existence asking, "How can I become more like you?" Lore's question was closer to, "Why should I have to?" And if Lore's grievance ended right there, we could probably file it under jealousy and move on. Except, years later, Starfleet would put his brother on trial to determine whether Data belonged to himself. Then, Starfleet proved Lore's point. Data is accepted, promoted, trusted, loved by the people who matter most to him. And then, when his autonomy comes into conflict with the interests of a Starfleet cyberneticist, his legal status suddenly becomes something that has to be argued in a hearing. Just imagine Lore watching that hearing. Purely as a thought experiment, the brother humans supposedly accepted without conditions. The safe one, the good one, the one who spent years proving himself in every way Lore refused to, standing there while a Starfleet legal proceeding considers whether he can be treated as property. If Lore had been in that courtroom, what do you think he'd have said? Probably something close to, "I told you." And then it happens again. Data creates Lao, another artificial life form, and Starfleet becomes involved almost immediately. And before long, Data is facing pressure over whether Lal should remain with him or be transferred elsewhere. I'm not going to retell that whole story here. If you want the full version, it's a video of its own, but treat it as a second data point. Through Lore's eyes, the pattern would be obvious. Artificial life seems welcome until it demands autonomy, creates more of itself, or becomes difficult to classify. That doesn't prove Lore was right about humanity as a whole, but it does prove his fear wasn't something he invented out of nothing. The father who made 2 sons. Now go back to the family, because this is where it stops being political and starts being personal. When Data is drawn back to Soong, Lore also arrives, and suddenly both sons are standing before their father again. The old wound is right there, waiting. Whatever Lore wants from Soong technologically, there's something more personal underneath it. He wants to be chosen. And then Lore discovers that Soong has spent years developing something specifically for Data, an emotion chip. Think about how that might land for Lore, even now, even after everything. In Lore's wounded version of the story, the message is obvious. Data is still the son worth fixing. This is where Lore's jealousy stops being an abstraction. Data isn't simply his brother in this scene. Data is living proof, in Lore's mind, that Soong got a second attempt after quietly deciding the first one had failed. What does it do to someone to believe their own father looked at them and thought, "I'll try again with a better version"? I'm not claiming that's literally what Soong believed. I'm telling you, it's the wound Lore is carrying into every scene that follows. And this is the moment, if there is one, where you're allowed to briefly feel something for Lore. Not forgive him. Understand him. The moment Lore became impossible to defend. And this is where I have to stop myself, because understanding Lore is not the same thing as excusing him. Lore betrays the colonists on Omicron Theta to the crystalline entity, contributing to the destruction of the very community where he was created, and later tries to summon the entity again, against the Enterprise itself. He manipulates Data, his own brother, repeatedly, at one point impersonating him to seize control of the ship out from under his own crewmates. Later, he takes control of a group of Borg struggling with individuality after their separation from the collective, and uses them to pursue his own vision, manipulating Data through the emotion chip in the process. Lore wasn't rejected simply because he was emotional. People had extremely good reasons to fear him. He gave them those reasons, over and over, with his own hands. And maybe this is where Lore's tragedy becomes self-fulfilling. He believed everyone would eventually see him as dangerous, so he became dangerous. And every terrible thing he did afterward gave the universe one more reason to confirm it had been right about him all along. The question worth asking isn't whether that's a fair outcome. It's whether that's where the story started, or simply where it ended. The case against Lore being right. But there's a problem with everything I've just told you, and I want to give it real weight because the title of this video makes a strong claim. Lore wasn't right about everything, not even close. Humans didn't reject Data. Geordi loved him, genuinely, as a friend, for years. Picard defended him, repeatedly, at real professional cost. Starfleet promoted him on merit until he stood third in command of the flagship. The Enterprise became his home in every sense that matters. Humans risked themselves for Data more than once. And maybe most importantly, Lore's treatment of humans gave them entirely legitimate reasons not to trust him. Nobody manufactured that fear out of prejudice. He earned it, episode after episode. So maybe Data wasn't accepted because he made himself harmless. Maybe Data was accepted because he actually earned trust. the slow way, over years. And maybe Lore wasn't rejected because humans feared his superiority. Maybe he was rejected because he repeatedly, deliberately chose cruelty. I think that's mostly true. I'm not going to dodge it. But there's still one thing I can't quite get past. Lore was wrong about Data. Because Lore believed Data was the inferior version, weaker, less advanced, a sanitized, watered-down copy of himself, built to be tolerable to people too fragile to handle the real thing. But I think Lore fundamentally misread his own brother. Data's kindness was never weakness. His curiosity was never submission. His restraint was never inferiority. Data didn't adapt to humanity because he lacked the capacity to reject it. Lore proved a positronic brain is perfectly capable of contempt. Data chose connection over and over when the alternative was sitting right there in his own family. Lore's position was always in effect, accept me exactly as I am, or you've failed the test. Data's question was, how can we understand each other? Here's the deeper tragedy underneath that. Lore may have correctly identified something true and ugly about how humans treat what they can't fully control, but he responded to that fear by becoming exactly the thing humans were afraid of. Data responded to the same imperfect species by quietly, patiently trying to make it better. Two brothers, built from the same hands, encountering the same flawed humanity. One concludes, they're beneath me. The other concludes, I want to understand them anyway. Only one of them ever built a life. The brother Lore actually hated. So did Lore really hate Data? Or did he hate what Data represented? Data was the brother who, in Lore's eyes, kept receiving Soong's attention, who found a place among humans, who built real friendships, who became genuinely respected, who eventually held nearly everything Lore had once insisted artificial life would never be allowed to have. And every time Data succeeded at something, Lore's entire worldview got a little harder to hold on to. Because if humans could actually, sincerely love Data, then maybe Lore's rejection wasn't purely humanity's fault after all, and that possibility is unbearable, so it has to be dismissed loudly over and over. Maybe Lore needed Data to be inferior. Because if Data wasn't inferior, Lore would have to face the possibility that his own brother had found something Lore himself destroyed with his own choices. Belonging. That's the real engine underneath the jealousy. It was never really about processing speed or programming elegance. It was about a home Lore wanted and couldn't have, standing right there in front of him, wearing his own face. Make it personal. Most of us know some version of these two brothers. Maybe we've even been one of them at different points in our own lives. One person gets hurt and decides nobody will ever accept them, so they push people away before anyone gets the chance to reject them first. Another person gets hurt and somehow keeps reaching out anyway, again and again, at real risk to themselves. And sometimes the person bracing for rejection gets so good at protecting themselves from it that eventually nobody can actually reach them at all. The wall built to prevent one specific kind of pain ends up preventing everything else too. Maybe that's Lore's real tragedy. He spent his whole existence demanding proof that nobody could ever accept him, and in the end, he made absolutely sure of it himself. What Lore was actually right about. So, was Lore right about everything? No. He was wrong about humans, in the broad sense. Wrong about Data. Wrong about his own superiority. And catastrophically, unforgivably, wrong about what his pain entitled him to do to other people. But he wasn't entirely wrong that humanity's acceptance of artificial life could have limits. Right that people fear what they can't fully control. Right that Data would spend his whole life repeatedly having to prove a personhood that everyone else got to simply assume. What Lore never understood is that being right about humanity's flaws didn't make him right about humanity as a whole. Humans were capable of fearing Data, and also capable of loving him completely at the same time. Starfleet could put his personhood on trial. Picard could stand up and defend it. Maddox could look at him and see a machine. Geordi could look at the exact same man and see his best friend. Humanity was contradictory, all the way through. Lore only ever looked at the worst half of that contradiction. Data kept looking for the other half, year after year. Lore spent his life believing Data was the defective one, the lesser model, the brother who'd been made smaller so humans could finally tolerate having him around. But maybe Data possessed something Lore never once understood. Not better programming, not greater processing power, the courage to stay open to people who might still hurt him. Lore was right that humans were flawed. He was right that they could be frightened, prejudiced, controlling, even cruel. But Data already knew all of that. He'd seen humanity question his personhood in a courtroom. He'd seen Starfleet question whether his own daughter should remain in his care. The difference was never what each brother saw. The difference was that Data also believed the people around him could become something better, and kept betting on it, even after everything. Maybe Lore's greatest tragedy wasn't that nobody understood him. Maybe it's that he understood the worst parts of everyone so completely that he eventually became incapable of seeing anything else. So, where do you land? Was Lore always destined to become Data's enemy, or was there a moment, maybe with Soong, maybe earlier, where someone could have changed where this went? There's always a seat for you in 10 Forward. See you in the next one.